discernment is judgment through an open heart. So today we are going to be discerning what we need to do as a team together, how we can spread love, truth, discernment, not judgment, but keeping our hearts open. We need to connect with each other, release spaces or relationships that don't serve us as before, but most of all, create a collective consciousness, move through the starkness and hold the grief together. So as we are holding the grief together, I'd also like us to reflect on any other moments of triumph. We can still say that we have made it today by the grace of God. What things are you proud of in the last year? What have you learned? In what ways would you celebrate? It doesn't have to be graceful and pretty, but there is something. At least you can say you are alive today. So having held both the grief and the lessons from 2020, I'd now like each one of you to type 3 things that you would like to see for yourself or for the psychology fraternity in Kenya. So type 3 things, and I'm going to share mine. The 3 things I would like to see, number 1 is aliveness. I'd like to see aliveness in all its forms. Pop, zest, vibe, adventure, joy, beauty, inspiration, motivation, enthusiasm, vibrancy, aliveness. The other thing I'd like to see is connection. I'd like to see a lot of us still connecting, getting a purpose, a common purpose, congruence, unity in diversity, meaningful relationships. And number 3, I would like to see meaningful pursuits. That means, acknowledging each other, reverence for each other. So what 3 things would you like to see for the profession? Please type in the chat. So WebEx is not like Zoom. If you press the wrong button, you might leave the meeting. So be careful to just introduce yourself. You need to type in the chat, what 3 things would you like to see for psychology in Kenya this year? Just so we know that we all know how to use the chat. Let's go, everyone. Please type 3 things you would like to see for the psychology fraternity in Kenya this year. I've already said mine: aliveness, connection, and meaningful pursuits. So meanwhile, I can see Kathy is saying what she would like to see for psychology in Kenya this year, and maybe for herself too, is compassion. Thank you so much, Kathy. Who else would like to share? Please type in the chat, and it's okay to also introduce yourself. So Kathy, you can tell us your name, full name, where you're from, how did you know about this webinar? Are you a member of KPA or a guest? This is a public education forum. We have all people from all walks of life, including psychologists. So please introduce yourself and tell us 3 things you would like to see in the year 2020. Meanwhile, let me quickly introduce our panel. We have an esteemed panel today. And as you know, Kenya Psychological Association began 25 years ago in the year 1996, and the vision is professionalism in psychology. The Kenya Counselors and Psychologists Act was enacted on 30th July 2014. Moreover, the formulation of a board will operationalize its regulatory standards. Some of you have been asking, what is this regulatory standards? What is the law? What is the ethics? Today we are asking the experts. So if you would like to see more about the historical context of psychology in Kenya, you can Google an article I wrote 2019 at the APA called Karibu Kenya. So KPA members are leveraging their collective experiences, growth, and contribution in the global virtual ecosystem in order to thrive and flourish under the latest contemporary legal and ethical frameworks for the psychology profession and practice. In addition, Kenya Psychological Association members have resolved to collaborate to co-create innovative ways of transforming the application of ethics, the ideal universal ethics, into realistic culturally contextualized ethics in the complex landscape of Kenya. I say that in Kenya, we have a complex landscape in mental health, and we'll get to understand more about that. As you know, Kenya is now classified by the World Bank as a low middle income country in East Africa. So over to our esteemed panelist, Dr. Oscar Githua is a consultant forensic psychologist and the chairperson of Kenya Psychological Association. He is a member of the National Task Force on Mental Health in Kenya. He is also a member of the Subcommittee on Mental Health and Psychosocial Support for the COVID-19 pandemic response in Kenya. He has made significant contributions to both policy and legislation regarding the mental health system in Kenya. He has designed and implemented cutting-edge and evidence-based forensic psychology interventions in Kenya and in the USA over the span of his professional career. He is notable for his work as a leader in responding to the terror attacks at Westgate Mall, Garissa University College, 14 Riverside Complex, among others, providing trauma and psychosocial interventions to the affected people, security forces, and their families in Kenya. Dr. Githua was on the panel that deliberated and drafted the Kenya Counselors and Psychologists Act 2014. He was awarded as one of the top 40 under 40 men in Kenya 2014-2015 for his outstanding contribution in the field of psychology in Kenya. He has conducted many studies and has been awarded grants for cutting-edge research, whose findings he has presented in both local and international conferences. He is consistently featured as an expert on TV, radio, and print media outlets. I must admit, he is a darling of the media, household name, both locally and internationally, contributing to issues surrounding his areas of passion and expertise. He is passionate about mental wellness of security officers, men's mental wellness, and involving the youth in mental health awareness. Thank you so much, Dr. Oscar Githua. I am glad you are able to be here this morning. Our other panelist is Mary Kitaka. She is a clinical psychologist with True North Society. She has an MA clinical psychology from USIU Africa, a bachelor's in psychology from Mount Clair State University in New Jersey, USA. She is the elections committee chair at the Kenya Psychological Association. At True North Society, this is an organization that supports military veterans to reintegrate into society after their service and supports civilians. She has significant experience in treating psychological trauma. She co-led psychological interventions at the 14 Riverside Complex, the terrorist attack in 2019, and experienced individual and group psychotherapies. She has led managerial and supervisory positions of teams of counselors to support victims of torture and war trauma, and provided needs-based training for supervisees and personnel in Northern Kenya, UNHCR, Red Cross, among others. A laureate of the June 2020 TED Talk themed A New Dawn in Africa, she was inspired to share with the world her experiences as a mental health practitioner in a hilarious way, and was the brainchild behind the co-presentation, which I was honored to be part of, titled Humor for Resilience in Africa, which has evolved into a process group for mental health practitioners. In her free time, Mary loves to travel, laugh, read, explore her spirituality, as well as spend time with family and friends. So I cannot exhaust the CVs of our panelists this morning. We are with the right hands, and I will now begin the questions with Dr. Githua. The Kenya Mental Health Task Force Report 2019, of which you are a member, recommends mental health and well-being towards national happiness and prosperity. There has been an unprecedented increase in the demand for mental health services during the COVID-19 pandemic, and obviously the need for psychologists, the need for psychology policy design and implementation in a dynamic landscape, including now we have remote delivery of services through technology such as this platform. Why is a foundational understanding of the legal and ethical frameworks impacting psychology critical and very important now more than ever? In other words, what is the current status on legal and regulatory framework in Kenya as far as mental health is concerned? Over to you, Dr.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Joyce, for that very elaborate introduction. It's really great to see everyone here. Mary, it's good to see you. It's good to have you. And I want to welcome everyone who's on this webinar. Welcome to this this moment that we're having. I really hope it's going to be edifying to everybody. On to your question, Wangari, about the legal framework. So the relationship between the law and psychology in Kenya has been very interesting. It's like if I could describe it, it's been one of those very gray areas until last about June 1st, when the president himself noted that there was an increase in a lot of crimes, a lot of incidents, a lot of issues which were tied to mental unwellness. And so let me take that before that. So of course that's when he spoke. But the one thing everybody has to understand about the law and about policy and about if it can work, if it does not have buy-in from the top, usually from all aspects, whether you're talking about legislative arms of government, executive, and in some instances the judiciary, what you'll end up having is very good policies, very good laws written, and they end up rotting in shelves. So that's what had happened to the law that I was a part of in terms of drafting. We were in a harmonization panel. At the time, there were 3 laws competing at the same time. We had to collapse them into one law. It was even signed by the president on the 30th of July, 2014, like you rightly said, became effective on the 4th of August. But I can promise you until today, it's never seen the light of day. But it's not because it's not a good law. It's because nobody even knew about it. About 2 years later, the Ministry of Health convened us again and said, wait a minute, who wrote this law? And that's when we realized, my goodness, the Ministry of Health themselves did not even know about its existence, let alone the Kenyans who are supposed to be consuming it. So the first thing I'll say is this: we have a law for psychology. It's been riddled with other things, and I think later in the discussion we'll talk about it. But it's been a good law to actually regulate our profession. It's important for everybody, even as we start this discussion, to understand if you are what we call illegal, which means unrecognized under law, you will probably not do too much. You'll do many things amongst yourselves in your own community, but you will not be listened to seriously by everyone else. So where we are right now is that law is supposed to be being implemented, and the first thing to implement should be the board. The only challenge with that, Wangari and everyone else, is that for a board to be formed, it means that the Ministry of Health has to budget for that to happen. So, of course, when the president talked about the mental health issues last year, he then commissioned the formation of the task force, which I was privileged to be part of, and I'm privileged to be part of. And we did our job by going around the whole country, collecting Kenyans' views, talking about what needs to be done. And the reality was that it's not like we didn't know what needed to be done. We could have sat down in a room and written those things in 2 days. We could even have called everyone on this call and would have done that. But because of credibility, and because, again, we needed Kenyans to be part of the document, and they were in a very powerful way, we did what we did. And on July 7th this year, we delivered that document. So the thing is, that's where we are right now. In psychology, we need to be legal and stop being illegal, but that's not up to us necessarily. It's up to authorities. And we'll talk about that a bit more. Let me not take too much time. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that overview. We are proud of you representing the field of psychology. We need more Dr. Oscars in this lifetime and beyond. Thank you so much for that response. So over to Mary, as a clinical supervisor and particularly a telesupervision provider. Can you hear me? All right. How may an understanding of universal ethical principles help guide psychologists' decision, even when specific ethical guidance around telehealth service delivery is not yet fully available? Mary, over to you.
Thank you, Wangari. And thank you, Dr. Oscar. I feel very privileged to be on this panel with you. You are my former professor, and I'm happy to be here with everybody. And good morning to you all. Wangari, I think I'll use some slides to answer the question.
All right.
Yeah, for the purposes of people who might not be familiar with psychology, and we are not going to assume that everyone is familiar with this profession. And we have 5 principles basically that guide our perspective on what we do and in mental health. So as I was thinking about this webinar today and this particular question, I thought it would be good to share with everybody what guides us as psychologists. I think because Dr. Oscar is here and he's very well versed with the legal part, I will strictly focus on the ethical frameworks that guide psychologists in what we do. And therefore, how does that work in this era of COVID-19 and the future of psychology, which will also include using of technology? Okay. So we have 5 principles. For those of us who are psychologists here, this might be revision, but we want to not just talk amongst ourselves. We also want to educate everybody else what guides psychologists so that they can hold us accountable. If we are not practicing these things, if they meet us out in the field, they know that this psychologist is not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and therefore something needs to be done, some action needs to be taken. Because as practitioners, we know that there's also a lot of, I don't want to there's a lot of unprofessionalism also because of the things that Dr. Oscar began by speaking about. So we want to educate the public on the things that guide us so that they can join us in making sure that we are moving in the right direction. So the first principle, so there are just 5. The first principle is about, basically those 2 words up there you see are just saying doing good and not doing harm. They seem like very complicated words, beneficence and non-maleficence. So they just mean doing good and not doing harm to people. So we are in the health sector, and therefore we are tasked with the responsibility of taking care of human beings and especially their minds. So that means that we have to be guided by guidelines that are similar to what doctors, nurses, and other healthcare professionals use. So we want to make sure that we establish relationships of trust with the people whom we are working with, and especially, and then again, if we are teaching students who are coming up in the profession, we want to have relationships that are, honest and that kind of thing. So my recommendation for this particular principle is we want to remain engaged and connect with clients or students during online sessions. Even in my own experience, I'm literally speaking from experience of doing teletherapy and maybe doing trainings online. It's a different type of challenge where you have to remain engaged and intentional to connect with your clients or the people you're teaching, because you're not there in person. So there's maybe distractions in your house, especially if you're doing this from home. it's hard to focus. Maybe if you're I know many women are multitaskers, so you might be cooking for your family as you're also trying to teach, and that can be a serious distraction. Or you have people walking around in your house or wherever you are doing these webinars or online sessions from. So you want to really intentionally be engaged. You want to be aware of your professional judgments and actions. So what I mean by that is things like remembering to dress professionally, preparing for your sessions, keeping appointments with your clients, the things that you would do otherwise if you were doing this physically. Time management, it can be very tempting to go on in teletherapy or in an online session for longer than is recommended, which is about an hour and a half if it's a psychotherapy session. So keeping your camera on if you're the one who is actually hosting this meeting. So those are just basics, yeah, but they're very important for us to remember. And the other thing that is very important for us as professionals is to have self-care through clinical supervision, and not to overload ourselves with many sessions, not more than, personally, I would recommend not more than 5 sessions for a professional to do. If it's group sessions, not more than 2. Because we're still learning about this whole teletherapy in Kenya. It may have been done for a longer period elsewhere, but we don't want to overdo it before we understand it. And to say that sometimes we can be overwhelmed and it's okay to reduce our client load, and to refer people whenever is appropriate. The other thing is fidelity and responsibility. So I think I may have repeated this slide. Sorry about that. So fidelity and responsibility basically means having the client's well-being first and foremost. Okay. And so we want to have a good rapport with them. And how do we build the rapport? We meet them, if it's strictly online, so that means maybe you met them through a phone call or an email. So you really want to think about how you're going to conduct your sessions, how you're going to be making communications with them. I would recommend initially you want to talk to these people on video or a phone call, and then from there you can move on to these other types of media. Okay, you want to maintain our appropriate hours of communication with people. Even clients need to know this. All of us are potential clients, so I still think this is very important for all of us. You don't want to get angry at your psychologist because they didn't respond to your email at 10 p.m. And then also we want to maintain our relationships with our other colleagues. During this time of COVID-19, you might forget your colleagues because you haven't seen them in so long. Just based on the physical distancing that has reduced contact, yeah? And the other thing is integrity. Integrity is very important in our profession for things I mentioned earlier. So we want to be honest, we want to be truthful, we want to engage people in a way that they don't feel cheated, they don't feel robbed, things like that. So basically we want to provide our clients and our students, our colleagues with accurate information. If you don't know something, it's okay to say I don't know, or let me consult and I'll get back to you. Yeah, so integrity is very crucial in our profession. And that doesn't change because we are using teletherapy. And then the other principle is justice. So we want to be fair to the people we are engaging, whether we are engaging them online or otherwise. We want to use the tools of the trade, so to speak, our training and our experience to the best of our ability, so that we are giving people the highest quality. And even things like offering fair prices to clients and to, the people we are engaging. And fair pricing here, I leave it at fair pricing because it differs. It's determined by very many things: level of experience and training of the psychologist, among other things. So you also want to talk to clients and the people you're engaging about the costs. We know that this is a big challenge in Kenya at the moment. We find even psychologists having to do a lot of pro bono work, which is not fair to them, because they have bills to pay on just a fundamental level. But also, it's not fair to the training and years that they have spent in their lives preparing to be the people they've become, right? So it's important that fairness is we think about being fair, both to ourselves as professionals, but also to our clients. And then the other thing is basically respecting people's rights and dignity. Yeah. So as professionals, we want to make sure that we are respecting people's privacy and confidentiality. And there's a unique challenge in doing teletherapy about confidentiality. And here is where psychologists want to consult with their clinical supervisors, or even do a lot of reading, because if you're having challenges in knowing how to, for example, protect data of a client, you're sending client data via the internet, and you don't know what the procedures for doing that are, you never know where that information will end up. So that can violate the rights and dignity of this person. We want to also conduct the sessions in a private space, yeah? Something I alluded to earlier. You could be in your house, yes, but you're speaking with your client and all this information is being listened to by your family members or some friends who have visited you. So you're not respecting the client's dignity. And also, we want to make sure that we are educating our clients at every stage. So that means that you discuss things like the contingencies of if you experience technological challenges. What do we do if we happen to run into, the WebEx is not working very well. We've tried a few platforms, they are not working. So what can we do? Personally, I've actually found it very good to have a first session with clients physically, if possible, and then discuss all these things and then now go online. But if that's not possible, you can spend a good amount of time in your first session to discuss all these, housekeeping things and ground rules of how you're going to engage, how they're going to send their payments to you, how you're going to share any documents you might want to share with them, what mode you're going to use. For example, let me give an example. So you may not really want to use something like WhatsApp to share client documents, okay? for many reasons. How safe is it? What if they lose their phone, or what if you lose your phone? What if someone has access to your phone and finds the client documents there? So we want to think about all these things and talk about them with our clients. So without having to go so deep into many things, because we know that not all of us are psychologists here, I thought I would just summarize your question in that way, in answering them, in answering that question in this way, and I hope that it makes sense to people. If not, if anyone has any questions, they are welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that overview of the 5 main ethical principles. I know some people add a few more, like veracity, which means truthfulness, ukweli, but these are the 5 main principles, and you've elucidated them very well. So back to Dr. Oscar Githua. There have been concerns about mental health professionals and their COVID-19 safety and allocation of scarce resources. In the complex legal landscape, as you described it, of the profession of psychology in Kenya, what would you say is the top priority for psychologists to ensure good standing in professional bodies, full accreditation or licensure or practice certificates or trainings, and which resources would you say are best for supporting ethical decision making that psychologists can use in planning and delivering telehealth services? In other words, how can we, as Kenyan psychologists, ensure to set the standard in Africa and the world in mental health services?
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Wangari, and thank you, Mary, for that very elaborate ethics primer for people, especially even those who are not psychologists, or even those who might not have been as well trained as you have been, because that's also the other issue. We see that people go through programs, but then they're not really inducted properly. Thank you for that. So, Wangari, you're talking about the telehealth landscape in our country, and especially seeing the rise of cases of people becoming, probably, let me not call it unstable, but really mental health issues coming to the fore because of the pandemic. I mean, I don't think that that those did not exist before. I just think that because of the calmness and stillness of the pandemic, what has happened is that now they've become more accentuated. When you're living your life and you're moving very fast, it's really difficult to see what's going on. But right now, when people have curfews, when you have like limited movements and all of that, it kind of seems to accentuate what might not be right in the area of mental health. Now, for psychologists, rule number 1, if you have attended any psychological program, and if you are in a psychological program, the number 1 thing that I always advise anybody is to join a professional association. The reason why you do that is because, there's a level of networking and accountability and camaraderie that you get hanging out and by being with other professionals that you cannot get from just hanging out or spending time with other people who are not professionals like you. So the first thing that does, it actually socializes you into what does a psychologist do, what are some of the ethics. You see things like what Mary has just outlined are not common knowledge on the streets. So at least you'd be able to learn things like these by being part of that association. So the other thing you could do is to probably ensure that you belong to in fact, one of the ways I just like to put it to psychologists is about competence. The idea of competence, always keeping yourself current, making sure that you are getting good supervision whenever you're doing whatever work you're doing. Because I know that a lot of times we focus only on individual or group client work, but also these other kinds of work that psychologists are engaged in, including things like assessment work, including things like probably even public speaking or talks in seminars and what have you. So the idea is to make sure that your competence is always up to par by having good supervision, making sure that you are reading consistently yourself, making sure that you belong to, I like to look at supervision in 2 ways, is what I call peer supervision, as well as supervisor, supervisee relationship where you have someone more experienced in the issue that you're working on to deal with you. So the other thing is to also make sure that you are accredited by whatever that professional body is, and what that means is being given a practice certificate. Now, let me be. I do not want to be the misleader, and especially in my position, I'm very careful about what I say, because I might say it and then it might actually influence someone negatively. So let me put it out there for people to understand. The only legal entity that can license you is the government. And let that be very clear to anybody. So if you ever hear any association telling you about licensure and all of that, it might just be out of probably wanting to talk about the accreditation or credentialing people, which is okay. But let's be careful, because what will happen is that when the board is formed, they'll be the ones who will be licensing you. So maybe what the term they might use is registration, because the word that they can use. If they have a registrar, they'll say all counselors and all psychologists have to be registered, which will be tantamount to the licensure we're talking about. So at least make sure that you have a credentialing or a certificate of practice from your association, because it actually ensures that you've met a minimum amount of competence. And that's the idea of licensure. Minimum, not maximum. It doesn't mean that when you get that license, now you're the best of the best, or whatever. It just means that you're now beginning your journey to becoming a good professional, like what Mary said, and I think also Wangari mentioned about things like self-care, making sure that you're operating within the space of ethical practice. And in fact, let me also back Mary's presentation up with a small primer and a way of understanding ethics and understanding laws. So there are three levels of regulation, which will always happen in psychology and in most other professions. And that is the legal space. So first of all, laws are things that must be followed by everyone. So for instance, once we get the board and all of that, let's do a 2-week revival course in a church or in a mosque or somewhere else, and then come out calling yourself a psychologist. That will not be allowed. So the law will come in what the minimum standard of being a psychologist would be. And so because of that, what will happen is that everybody must obey that. Okay, so the law is universal. It means that everybody must follow it. The second level, which is a bit of a higher tier, is what are called policies. And policies are instituted by individual organizations, individual institutions that govern the behavior and the practice of what you're doing. So for instance, if you're a practicing psychologist in a hospital, or if you're practicing psychologist in a university or in a school, your requirements might be a bit different, and not because you're not the same professions, but because the atmosphere within which you work is a bit different, and the context. So the level is ethics. And ethics for me is really key, because ethics also falls into what I call self-regulation. The things that Mary was talking about, you're not going to find anybody holding a gun to your head and telling you must actually have non-malfeasance and beneficence to people, or that you must follow justice or you obey people's human rights. But it is important that these are self-regulatory. And one of the places which that can be actually enhanced is using the association's ethical principles themselves. At KPsyA, for instance, we have a set of ethics actually have, which I think are due for review sometime pretty soon, because we have to also include the questions of telehealth, telepsychology, as well as many other things that we probably need to include that are culturally appropriate for us. So I think for me, the idea is that as long as we can understand them in those three tiers, it will actually help us to avoid any problem, especially if you think about what the atmosphere has been in our legal regime. We seem to be stuck a bit, but I my remarks this morning by saying that we have to have political will from the executive. We have to have a will from the judiciary and the legislature as well. And hopefully in my next round, speaking, I talk about the things that I see that are already happening that point to us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Aris. So I will now go back to Mary. Thank you, Dr. Aris. You've elucidated it very well. So Mary, specialized mental health access is still too expensive for most Kenyans to afford. Yet, it is very essential to engage families as partners and supporters when delivering telehealth services. In utilizing a community-based approach, how may psychologists in Kenya navigate harmful cultural beliefs, attitudes, and stereotypes in increasing psychology outreach awareness? So speaking to the stigma and what we can do using now the law and ethics that we have learned to ensure best practices and evidence-based delivery. Welcome, Mary.
I'll actually begin my response with a story, a personal story of how I actually did this in my community. So my home area is Makueni County, and I happened to be home one time in 2018, actually around this time, and the chairman of our church, church is very crucial, especially in rural areas, yeah? So the chairman comes to my home and tells me, Mary, I hear that this is your profession, and 13 people have died by suicide just in the last 1 year in this village. Okay, so what are you going to do about it? I don't know where else to go, but I know that this is what you do, so can you help us? Then I'm thinking, I'm here on holiday, I'm trying to actually do my self-care, but this situation presents itself. So what did I do? I quickly gathered 2 people who are people that they trust at the church and gave them a very, very brief overview of mental health, like brief, 1 hour, but it had everything I felt they needed to understand that would facilitate the talk I was going to give the next day. So what did I do? The next day after the church service was finished, I was given an hour to speak to the church. Okay, so in an hour, I was able to literally educate the people of mental health at a very, very, very basic level so that they understand what is happening in their community, because you can imagine the stress they're going through. People are just dying and they don't know why these people are dying. They've never seen such a thing. Or if they've ever seen it, they don't know what it's all about. And after I did that, that now prompted them to now think, okay, so now we have a little understanding of what is going on. So what do we do? Okay, so now I directed them to the hospital. So when you feel like this, please go to the hospital. And then what I did, I made sure that the hospital I'm directing them to actually has the services that they are seeking. So I actually went there, made sure that there's counselors and psychologists there. I actually happened to meet the first lady of the county, who happens to also be a psychologist. So I told her what is going on in my village, and she directed me to the appropriate people. So now in my village, people know that when they see those things that Mary talked to them about, they go to the hospital. Okay, so this is not being, this is not kurogwa, this is not demon possession, you know. So we have to be very, very innovative and creative in how we educate and engage the community, especially in rural areas. So that is just one example of community engagement that I've done. I've worked in other rural areas, and I think that really helped me master the technique of talking to people who have no idea what mental health is, right? So those are some of the things. And what is that I did? We call it psychoeducation, okay? So you look at the people you're talking to and you engage them at the level that they are at so that they can get the help that they need. The other thing that we are also doing as psychologists is engaging communities through radio. We also know radio in our country is very powerful. Not everybody has access to a smartphone. So we engage communities via radio, via television, via social media, and we educate them about mental health. And we can all do this as professionals. Sometimes it doesn't cost us much. It only costs 5 minutes of your time of posting something on mental health on your platform, on a social media platform, and reducing ignorance, right? So the second part of your question, I would say, is we can support families first through psychoeducation on mental health. If we are having a client who we feel that their family may need to understand mental health better so that they can be supported well. Because one of the things we know that happens with people relapsing or not getting better is that their families are not supportive because they don't know how to support the person. So we want to engage families, even if it's via teletherapy, to ensure that they are actively engaged in the well-being of their relatives. And also to organize community forums like the one I just talked about in my story. And those can be both physically and online, such as what we are doing today. We can engage people, in a church forum or wherever you feel is good. But also we can do them online.
Thank you so much. We are just about to floor questions because we want to end at the top of the hour or thereabouts. But I think there's one pressing question from all the 82 people who registered. Majority of them are asking, and I think Dr. Oscar Gidua would be the best person to answer this. So one of the challenges that mental health professionals have encountered is lack of proper recognition and hence compensation for their services. What do you see as the way forward to remedy this?
Wangari, thank you so much. And to the 82 people who've asked this question and at large, let me begin by saying that it's not our fault. It's very easy to start hearing people themselves and going into the idea that, psychologists have brought this on themselves. The truth is that psychology, even as a concept, is such a relatively new idea in this country and this culture. The idea that you can go and speak to somebody about your problems and then they kind of help you to walk through them is foreign because it's foreign because they're not your family member. Not because they don't, not that because Africans don't do that. Traditionally, we've done it with our aunties, with our parents, brothers and sisters, and other community structures. But the idea that you have to talk to somebody, like now I go to Mary, I tell her, Mary, I can't sleep and I'm having insomnia, please help me. And then I pay her 5,000 per hour to talk. Are you serious? Now, that's the first problem. The first problem has been the idea that the translatability of what we do to the African culture and the context has not yet been fully grasped. That's number one. Number two, because of lack of continuity with political regimes, why when Wafula Munyini was putting that idea of the counselors and the psychologists floor, he was an MP, and when he actually went, he put it there. It was debated once, then they had to go to election. He re-elected will continue. When he went for elections, he was defeated, and of course, if it was not another member's bill, they're not going to pick it up. Right now, we seem to be very fortunate. We have the Honorable Senator Sylvia Kasanga in the Senate, who's really partnering very strongly with the health in the National Assembly, in the Parliament, to really see that psychologists and mental health is given a front row seat in this country, and especially the discussion about health. So the reality is, this is not going to be a race that is won by the impatient. If you're impatient, you'll not be able to reap the benefits. But if you're patient and understand that culture has to also intertwine, that laws come from a culture, and that's why it's a problem. Because I to the practice of psychology necessarily. at least the way we have studied it in the Western setting. So what we have to do is like what Mary is doing, like what some of us have also been doing in the community. If you're not relevant in your communities, my friends, you will not be recognized. So don't imagine that you're going to graduate, then start your nice clinic in the corner somewhere, and then you start making money because people will come to you. I have said this and I'll say it again. Psychology is a walk-in client business. And I hope you can use a pen and write this. It is an outreach mission. If you can't go to the community, if you can't go to people, let me tell you, nobody will actually recognize what you do. Nobody will care about what we do as a profession. So my take is this. More of us do what Mary is doing. More of us need to do what Wangari is doing. More of us need to do what I'm doing, what those of us who believe in outreach are doing. And the more we are seeing, the more visible we are, the more recognized we're going to be. I can also tell you, even with a good law, you're not going to be saved from the idea of being recognized or being treated with respect. Also, the two, competence. I keep going to competence. If you're not competent, you're also a reason as to why we're not recognized. Because I hear stories of malpractice, even by your office or talking to you, and you don't even do basic things like consent. Ethically and legally, you're supposed to consent with somebody, that you're going to talk to them about their very intimate issues, and that you're going to begin the process. Before you go for surgery in the hospital, it's in many forms, isn't it? That is exactly what we need to be doing as psychologists. So we need to be professional. We need to actually have people that we're working with. And I think for me, if we can be able to start working like that, will be better. The reality is this: it's been like a pregnancy. A pregnancy at the end of the day has to come to a conclusion, and that conclusion it has to determine that conclusion. A birth and a healthy baby that's going to actually do a lot of things, and for us, that's the legal labor that we're in right now. We want that board is created. It's not a political thing. It becomes a true thing that actually focuses on Kenyans on psychological and counseling services in this country. That's where we stand, Wangari, that we are at the cusp of, we're actually on the brink of actually having a breakthrough. And by the way, because of the mental health task force that we had, we also proposed something pretty radical. And we proposed a lot of radical things, but that was deliberate. Because if you don't dream big when you have the chance to be at a stage, what's going to happen? You'll never imagine that you people who are worth being talked to. And I can tell psychologists another story, that mental health task force had many professionals. Psychologists, it had public health specialists, has medical doctors, and I can promise you, everybody wants better mental health for Kenyans. At the end of, to remember, there's a board that's now been created for Mathare. We're going to be seeing more of these kind of mental health boards being put up, and that's where it's going to begin. So hopefully that helps to clear the air a bit. Thank you so much, Wangari, for that.
Right, thank you so much. I now see comments in the chat box. Please send your questions. We only have a few minutes. And Pastor, thank you for being here. Pastor Dorothy Obengo says, I am a counseling psychologist. I teach at Moffat Bible College, training pastors. The counseling and psychology profession in Kenya is still viewed or perceived by healthcare professionals, especially doctors and nurses, as we are perceived as intruders into their space. So they rarely refer patients for counseling. Most potential clients also do not understand the role of a counselor and still equate them with advisors. This is so true. Many more, it's moving, the chat is moving fast. Counselors and psychologists have to struggle to make their services known, and this affects income and effectiveness. Dennis says, in order to promote holistic community engagement and sensitization, it is important to engage the support of other mental health professionals. I work in a local community, and nursing officer in charges are very elementary assessors and identifiers of various psychological health issues. This implies that collaboration with these professionals is necessary, given the lack of information in counseling, and its role to mental health is still growing. So the role of, primary health providers is what Dennis is alluding to, and the idea of interdisciplinary collaboration is what Pastor is talking about. Thank you so much for your comments and questions. We've noted all what you've said in the chat. This session is recorded, and you will definitely get a breakdown. Just as we finish, I would like to invite anyone who would like to also give any webinar on any critical themes under this theme, legal and ethical frameworks of psychology in Kenya, reimagining Kenyan psychology, roadmaps, action plans, and courses of action. What do we really want to see? And can we make our vision really clear so that we move collectively together? And just as we conclude, I will definitely give the panelists the last word. I would just like to rally each one of us. This is our clarion call to action. One of the classic debates in ancient philosophy is whether we need regulation in society. Are we trusted as professionals? Can we use virtue ethics and say we can achieve a utopian kind of ideal profession? Or do we actually need utilitarian ethics? Do we need to regulate the industry, protect the professionals from quacks? It is now clear we need to do that. And we have different people with varying interests and agendas. We are the ones to really be the voice for those who are not well understood in society. We are the people who prevent and treat mental health conditions. So ultimately, we save and improve lives through increasing health and well-being. So as we support the next generation, let us also take time to reflect, notice and acknowledge and champion and celebrate each other. I say it is wonderful to give people flowers while they're still alive. This is our collective work. This year, we only have one goal: to put the board in place. So we rise by lifting others. Let us celebrate unity in diversity and advance the mental health of the underrepresented, create more inclusive spaces, and just continue. I hope this webinar has given you additional impetus to continue to make a positive difference, because you can influence policy and strategic decisions in order to prevent groups of people from being unfairly disadvantaged. So as we finish, I'd just like to give Mary and Oscar a chance. We'll start with Mary to say the last comments, and any closing remarks, what is the key takeaway and the summary, and then we will conclude. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you again, Joyce. So my last words will be based on the topic of today, which is legal and ethical frameworks. And I want to say, as some of us have been trained outside this country in parts of the world where mental health is a bit further along in terms of its professionalism, in terms of people accessing mental health care, and even just the public's understanding of mental health. So for me, this is quite well put in terms of legal and ethical. I don't think that we want to lose any of these things. We want to have government regulation. That is very important for many reasons. For the reasons I alluded to, we don't want people being harmed because the psychologist did not, self-regulate in terms of being ethical. So we want protection for people so that they have a place to go. As Dr. Oscar told us, that the government will be the one responsible for licensure. So we want that people have a place to go and recourse if there's something that has happened that is unprofessional, unethical, and things like that. But at the same time, we want people to have autonomy and to have, freedom and self-efficacy. We want people to regulate themselves as well. You don't want to be constantly policed by someone else. You know what you need to do. You know that you're not supposed to be cheating your clients. You know you're not supposed to be robbing them. You're not supposed to be having unprofessional relationships with them. You know all these things. And if you are forgetting, revise what you know, and that's quite in order, or get some supervision that you're struggling with a particular issue, right? So I think both are important. We need to self-regulate, but I think we also need to be regulated so that there's an overall governing body that is looking at everybody's welfare and well-being. And then for 2021, just as I finish, I wish everybody the best. For the professionals who are here with us, this is as a colleague of mine likes to say, we are clearing the path for mental health in this country. So let us not get tired and give up. It's difficult. Sometimes all of us may want to give up at some point, but let's not give up. The work we are doing is benefiting so many people. So many people's lives have been changed. People's lives have been saved. So let's keep at it. And when we see forums such as this, let's get involved. If we see things that the government is recommending, let's get involved. Let's not be bystanders. The only way change will come to us is if we go to it. We can no longer be bystanders and just comment on all the deaths we see on TV and here on radio. We have to do something. So thank you very much for coming and for being here with us. And I look forward to further engagements within the year.
Thank you, Daktari.
Wow, thank you so much, and thank you, Mary, for that conclusion from your end, and thank you, Joyce, also for your clarion call to everybody. As I finish, I think my final remarks will be centered around introspection, reflection. I think that 2021 has to be the year where psychologists and counselors stop having infights amongst ourselves. It also has to be the year where we stop bickering about things that have not been done to us. It's a year we actually begin to act. It's a year where we begin to take our place. And how we take our place is by actually giving more. And the idea is that, President K many years ago asked Americans, don't ask what the country can do for you, but ask what you can do for the country. I think for me, my position, I think where I am right now in my career, that's the same question I'd ask us as psychologists. Don't ask what the profession will do for you. Ask yourself, what can you do for the profession? And not only the profession, what can you do for the people of Kenya and the people that you serve? In terms of giving your time in an ethical manner, in terms of giving your time in a professional manner, in terms of you serving wherever you can actually be able to serve. This will be the only way the recognition that we look for will be relevant. Because you can't also go and graduate and spend so much money doing a degree, you do a master's, you do a doctorate, and then you go stay inside your house and expect that people will recognize you because you studied. For your information, at the time when you're in school and you're away, life was still going on. And nobody, and people are still going through their problems and they're solving them in one way or another. What we need to do is to actually become relevant. People that, yes, I know you've been dealing with your issues, but have you been dealing with them at the root causes and even to their full conclusion? This is what we are called to do. And I believe that if we actually can do this together, we're going to actually be very successful in 2021. And the words I'm going to take away are also from two participants who've talked about collaboration. And that's exactly where we want to fall. Collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. And I know that people keep having this, as a chair, probably I can be the one who broaches this one. That, do I join KPA? Do I join KCPA? Do I join KCGPA? And all that. Guys, join as many as you can. It's not a competition. As a matter of fact, you'll actually be pleased to know, and Joyce, I'm happy that this is recorded, that Elias Gikundi, the chair of KCPA, and I have actually been talking for a very long time. And as a matter of fact, our two executives are supposed to have a joint meeting to talk about the country, to talk about how do we move psychology forward? How do we get points of intersection to actually help our professionals to do much better? It's not a competition. That is not what we want to do, and neither are we going to be in any fights. My role is to unify people. My role is to actually encourage people and inspire them. So we're not going to have any fights. 2021, we've been fought by a tiny micro, 0.3 micron thing called the coronavirus. Do you need to be fighting each other? I don't think so. Right now, we've seen so much distraction and loss, and we are needed there to actually help heal people's souls and their hearts. So I think and I hope that this is actually the direction we need to take. For me, legally, let's be patient. We're just at the cusp of having something happen. Let's hope that the boards can be created. But I like what Mary said. Let's not wait for the board for us to become good psychologists. As a matter of fact, you'll be surprised. Many times people think that the names they know are the ones that are going to be on the board. You'll be surprised. The board is not for psychologists. It's for Kenyans. And so therefore, they're not going to look for the best psychologists to put on the board. They'll look for the best Kenyans to put on the board to prevent what Mary was calling malpractice and protecting Kenyans. So let's not be obsessed with the board, but let's be obsessed with being competent, doing the right thing, and actually working for Kenyans. And therefore, in due course, we're going to really get what we require. So thank you so much for this opportunity again. Wangari, thank you for organizing this, and for everyone who's attended this, thank you. We're hoping to have more engagements. I'm excited for this year. We've started at the right time. The best way to start is to just start. It's the second day of the year, and we've started. I don't know if there's any other webinar that was organized, but if there wasn't, guess what? We've done it the first time. So really, I want to congratulate you for that. And thank you everyone for attending. I wish you a good 2021, a blessed and prosperous one. Let's do much more. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. There are some questions streaming in that are a bit outside the scope. Let me address them very fast. Ronnie Mogore asks, what are safe online platforms for storing client records? So Mary and I ran supervision online for Kenya, Zambia, and the US, and we will be rolling out very soon a series of webinars so that you can learn the nuts and bolts, the technical details about this online transition. We are all in this very steep learning curve. So Ronnie Mogore, please watch out for that. And then who is this? Nazarene asks, say something about KPA. So I'm going to share screen and just explain to you what I was saying earlier about the kind of engagement we would like to see. So please note that, as I said at the beginning, I don't know if you were here, Nazarene, is that KPA began 25 years ago. We are actually this year celebrating quarter century. That's a legacy right there. And we are over 200 member strong professional body whose motto is actually professionalism in psychology. And so what we have launched today is the inaugural webinar in a series of webinars. We would like to have at least one webinar each month. And if you can see the screen, we have some themes that we are inviting you. I am the chair of the training committee, so I'll be at hand to welcome you, to have you set up the logistics for your webinar. Remember, now we are in G Health. G Health is global health. We are really in a global space, and we've got to reimagine and reconstitute whatever we think is psychology. And so we are no longer just talking. We are no longer just talking about Kenya. So here are some themes. The COVID-19 effects on psychology services and products. Let us do that. Board of counselors and psychologists. I don't know what's happening. I think I pressed something. Okay. Telemental health. As I said earlier, G Health, global health, E-health. That's one of the topics we are inviting people. Technology and virtual tools in psychology. Psychology in leadership. How can we influence the top echelons of power, politicians, clergy, opinion leaders? We are transdisciplinary professionals. We really work across anywhere where there are human beings. Wherever there are human beings, there is psychology, as Professor Emeritus Samson Munyoki says. Psychology of advertising and innovative psychopreneurship. Traditional or African psychology and psychotherapy is another very major theme, because now with many people moving online and becoming more modernized, we have forgotten another aspect. This is something that is very close to my heart, and I am leading some initiatives in that front on Afrofuturism in psychology. Then the impact of psychology on development or economic growth. We would like to see some things on emerging subfields in psychology. Psychology's professional bodies are diverse, but KPA stands out as one of the professional bodies that really recognizes and appreciates people who are not just in the mainstay traditional fields like clinical counseling. You can see even today on our panel, we had a forensic psychologist, the first in East and Central Africa. He was very humble, he did not say that, but we have many other subfields of psychology aside from only clinical and counseling. So diversity, and of course, we want to even break down these words. Even some of us don't know what is the difference between psychological counselor, counseling psychologist. You know, there are all these synonyms that are being used, psychotherapist, who is what, you know. Then the issue of diversity and disability inclusion. This is a very, 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 very key area and a pet subject of mine. I actually work in the field of deafness, and I was looking for a sign language interpreter for today. So if you know anybody who knows sign language, all our webinars need to be inclusive. We cannot be leaving out a section of the society just because they are differently abled. Globalization and knowledge economy. We are now in virtual ecosystems. You can enter and create expertise and be training people in America on personal development, coaching, mentoring, consulting. You are a psychologist. You have all that appertains to your degree, not only to read and write, all right? And then internet addictions. We have now the dark web and this idea of social media disillusionment, especially for the Z generation, the Y generation, you know. And then supervision and training, very critical. Continuing education units. What are the areas of growth that we need to identify and begin to equip, capacity build in terms of mental health promotion, prevention, early intervention, evidence-based diagnosis, assessment, and intervention. So since all our webinars are recorded, you can also pre-record your webinar and then submit to me, and we will be now putting it on the online platforms. And we will be launching the KPA conference. We've had conferences in the past. And so all our website and social media platforms will actually have that. And we are going to invite both members and non-members. However, members get more benefits. So please note that. I'll be talking to you about logistics. And of course, now you can use all kinds of interactive formats. You can see on such a platform, you can even share screen, you can show people videos, audio. We're not going to do the boring old style of, as we used to do in the past, of you know, just town hall meetings. All our town hall meetings are now moving online, and we now need to say the Kenyan story to the world. So that is our plan for this year. I'll be waiting for you to come in. And of course, I'll be sharing the webinar summary for today and all the recordings. So I hope, Nazarene, I have fully answered your question. We may not be able to take all the questions. Today is the beginning of a discussion, which is why I am inviting you to all come in and please present something. Let us shape our collective space. If we do not do it, then we leave a vacuum and other people come and tell us what to do. So Nazarene, I can see you're well answered. And thank you very much, everyone, for being here. Have a wonderful, wonderful year. Now, somebody requested that if you people don't mind, we can have a minute of silence for a colleague we lost who had graduated 97 days ago. She was my classmate. Her name was Dr. Lillian Otieno. Her story is typical of a lot of us, mental health professionals, giving and giving until you are dry, you cannot give anymore. And she was very dedicated and a servant of the people. We are honoring her legacy as well, because we know there are very few people with doctorates in clinical psychology. She had a vast future ahead of her. Dr. Gidu, I know she was one of your students. She was my classmate, actually. And we would like to just take a minute of silence as we finish. Thank you so much. So please let us observe a minute of silence. Hi. Okay, may we never forget that we have each other. May we never forget our divine support. May we continue collaborating. May we proceed boldly and bravely to create the psychology we want in Kenya and the world. All right, everyone, have a good one. And I'll see you soon in our next monthly webinar.